G'day watchers, welcome back to the channel. Today I have the pleasure to review yet another new brand which I haven't featured before. So this is actually the kind of carry case that it comes in. The original does come in an external cylinder, but this is the internal carry case, which is kind of a nice touch. I really like the practical aspects of the packaging. I know anytime I get a carry case, I'm excited because you can use it for other purposes, not something you just keep in a drawer and never use again. So there we go, that's actually the packaging there. I'm just going to put it aside, and then let's show you this particular piece, which, guys, this is indeed a Dan Henry. This is a Dan Henry 1970 limited edition. Now, Dan Henry is a company founded by the eponymous namesake Dan Henry, who is a prolific watch collector who later on wanted to make good design available at affordable prices, hence starting this company. Now the name 1970, as with other Dan Henry watches, evokes the year in which a lot of the design inspirations come from. So this is 1970s, meaning the period of where watches had some bright colors in the designs, some offbeat designs, not the conventional stuff. And in this case, it is of course inspired by the super compressor style divers of the era, including Longines, being one of the well-known ones, a watch I reviewed not so long ago. So this particular watch is listed at $270 USD on Dan Henry Watches website. I'll find other links and put it down below in the description as it becomes available for you guys to check out. Okay, so let's just get into the actual watch now. The movement in here is none other than a Seiko NH35A. You've seen this movement before, 21,600 beats per hour with 24 joules and a 41-hour reserve. It does have quick set date, in this case, black writing on a white disc implemented at the 3 o'clock window there. It does have hacking and it does have manual winding. You know all that already if you follow watches. The rated accuracy, of course, is -20 plus 40 seconds per day. In this case, it's running about -5 per day. I prefer it to be slightly fast. Plus 4, 5, 6 seconds a day would be perfect. But in this case, it's actually slightly minus, which is the regulation that comes with this. It is still within the rated accuracy, of course. Moving on to the case now, so let me just pan that around and let you guys look at this case here. 40 millimeters across. It does come in a 44 millimeter version, but this is, I guess, the more, demure, more decent 40 millimeter version. 316L steel. Thickness is 13.8 millimeters, including the domed crystal on the top there. The lug width is actually 22 millimeters, which you can argue may be slightly disproportionate, but because the band here tapers, it kind of works out okay. Lug to lug distance is a very kind of modest 46 millimeters there between my thumbs. And the overall weight, because this is a rubber strap, is only 80 grams on the wrist, which is very light. You can easily forget this because it really wears quite comfortably. Okay, talking about the finishing here. Right, the brushing on the top is radial, so the top surfaces of the lugs as well as the bezel is a circular brush patterning. It alternates to polish right on that surface there, and then to a longitudinal brushing on the side there, as well as alternating finally to a polished surface on the bottom side of the watch. So nice little transitions and the variety that they've implemented here. The overall case, of course, as mentioned earlier, is a compressor style dive case. I don't think it's a true compressor. They haven't actually talked that up. It just looks like a compressor style diver. A true compressor would actually get more water resistant with pressure, thanks to the deformation of the glass as well as pressure on the case back. This one I think is a straight screw-in case back, but look at that. It's really quite a gorgeous design there, and I think they call it the snacktopus. I don't know what that really means, but it's an octopus with I guess a traditional vintage dive helmet there. That's really what that symbol is, but it's really very richly engraved, kind of at a quality that you rarely see at this price point. And just going along the side there, you can see stainless steel automatic, water rating, all that. And just to note, limited edition, 330 of 1970 pieces. And that's kind of how Dan Henry does their watches. It's limited edition. with the pieces produce the same number as the year. So 1,970 pieces of this particular watch. Okay, so that's really the case there with the screw-in case back and screw down crown at the 4 o'clock position, which is actually the adjustment crown. This one isn't actually a screw-in crown. Interestingly, it does achieve a water rating of 200 meters, but people have questioned how successful that may be, given that that actually isn't a screw-down crown there controlling that bezel. Moving on to the dial, so let's just show you the dial there on profile there. So this is a matte black printed dial, right? All the writing on there, Dan Henry automatic, is printed. It does have raised lume markers, you know, for all positions except the 3 o'clock, which is replaced by that date window, right? And then outside that, it's got a grey chapter ring, which is actually loomed. So the loom is actually across the chapter ring, all the hour markers that you can see there, as well as the 3 hands, and the second hand being a small rectangle, and the hour and minute hand being interestingly split by a strip down the middle which doesn't have loom. It's the side of the hands that have loom. And of course I'll put a loom shot for you to see here how it looks like in the dark. The triangle on the rotating inner bezel does have a loom dot, but it's actually very faint and almost non-functional. That's actually one of the weaknesses, one of my gripes about this particular piece, is they didn't actually loom the timing bezel, which is a bit of an odd choice, you know, as far as I can tell. Okay, so moving on to the glass on the top. It is actually mineral glass, but they said that it's actually coated with sapphire. So it's a domed mineral glass, sapphire coated. This is the first watch which I featured on the channel, which says that the mineral glass is sapphire coated. I don't know how well that works, but I can tell you this glass is of course in, you know, pristine condition that you can see there. So maybe it works quite well. Tell me if you have any experience with sapphire coated glass. Lastly, guys, moving on to the strap here, right? This is a rubber strap. They call it tropic rubber. And you know, it's fairly comfortable. The quality seems okay, and you can see it has a relief of a kind of a canvas or purlin pattern on the outside with, you know, fake stitching relief. It's all rubber, there's no other material here, and tropic I think pertains to the perforations that you can see there on the watch. Moving on to the buckle here, it's really just a brushed steel buckle with a DH Dan Henry symbol there. Okay, so that's really the description of the watch. So let's put it on for the wrist shot now. All right, so there we have it, the Dan Henry 1970 limited edition on my 17 centimeter wrist. And just remember, it is actually 46 millimeter lug to lug distance, which fits very nicely on the wrist of my size. And I think it will fit nicely on most men's wrists in my experience, as far as I've seen amongst my friends and fellow collectors. So guys, that's the watch. What have I liked about this? I think it's a really neat design. I really like the design cues that they have gone. You know, it is actually kind of fairly original. I think there's no watch that exactly looks like this, but you know, it does take a lot of vintage inspiration of particularly this compressor style case. You know, I really like that handset that they've gone for, you know, the rectangle as well as the split loom. I haven't seen a handset quite like that. It's got a fairly decent Seiko movement, right? It's a workhorse movement, but it's a decent, reliable movement, the NH series. And, you know, that dome glass, it is glass, but it's sapphire coated, and it does give some very nice characterful distortions, which, you know, I always enjoy the distortions you get from dome glass like this, right? And then the finishing is pretty darn good, you know. I mean, look at the transitions between, you know, brush and polish, finishing on the bezel, right? Again, that transition facet there on the lug, right? You can see it's brush on the top, brush on the side, but it's got that polished bevel edge there. It's really quite nicely done, you know. For the price point, you rarely see finishing any better than this. In fact, I would say I don't see finishing better than this for the price point. What are the weaknesses? Well, I think there are a lot of watches around this price offering sapphire. So if you're going to go sapphire coated, why don't you, you know, offer a solid sapphire crystal? Maybe it's a cost consideration, but, you know, it would have been nice to include a sapphire for this type of piece. And then, you know, the other major thing I've mentioned already is the bezel loom. You know, that loom on that triangle is effectively non-functional. For a functional dive bezel, you really got to try to loom it, and they haven't quite done that on this particular model. Okay, so that's Dan Henry. Let me know if you have any Dan Henry. So if you have any experience with the brand, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts, guys. Right, for the last part of the video, I just want to do a side-by-side with this Spinnaker, right? The Spinnaker Bradner, which I reviewed recently, quite recently, you know, a watch which is not bad, but, you know, does it stack up against the Dan Henry? How does it stack up? You know, really, you know, just to show you a side-by-side here. The Spinnaker is a little bit more expensive. I can't recall the MSRP, but I'll list it right here for you guys to reference as the comparison against the 270 of the Dan Henry. This one also is a larger watch, 42 millimeters versus the 40 millimeters of the Dan Henry. So how do they stack up side by side? Well, the movement is exactly the same movement, right? First up, Seiko NH35, so there's no comparison there, it's exactly the same. Dial-wise, I would say the Spinnaker has a little bit more pop. Right, you can see that it's got applied markers. It's got a bit of a pop on the logo there, which, you know, it's chromed. I think it's got a little bit more here, and it's certainly got loom on the bezel. You know, loom shot right here. I'll insert for you to see that the bezel does have loom in this watch. So that's a step better than Dan Henry. But I would say the Dan Henry chapter ring is a damn sight better than the Spinnaker. This Spinnaker model is very, very difficult to read that chapter ring, almost useless. I think this one with the loom is superior with that chapter ring. Overall, I think the Spinnaker has a slight edge on the dial there, but it's marginal. The glass on top, well, Spinnaker has sapphire, Dan Henry has sapphire coated mineral glass, so I think this one does take it a bit. Where the Dan Henry really shines is that the finishing is far, far superior. I mean, you know, the finishing of the alternating brush and polish, as well as that very, very rich case back, definitely a lot better. Cross-hatching on the crowns as well is a nice vintage touch. That I think Longines was famous for doing that, as well as other compressor divers. You know, they've gone for cross-hatching for that vintage homage. Spinnaker hasn't. You know, I think the finishing is okay, but they've gone for completely brushed. So it's not quite as, you know, well done a job as the Dan Henry. They haven't got the cross-hatching on the crowns. They've just got a plain one there, Spinnaker etching there. You know, they've got a very, very, I guess, routine, very standard display back, as opposed to this display, you know, engraving, which is really, really so rich, you know, really very good and enjoyable to look at that one, as opposed to that display, I think. So I think finishing-wise, definitely the Dan Henry has it all over the Spinnaker. Lastly, the strap. You know, Spinnaker leather, I've really never been very impressed with. I think it really won't last, and the quality is very average. You know, I don't really know whether this is very, very good rubber. It probably isn't, but I think in the context, taking everything into consideration, I prefer the Tropic rubber strap. But, you know, let me know what you think. So guys, that's the finishing of this review, the comparison side by side of these two watches, you know, the Spinnaker being more recent, but, you know, maybe a purchase consideration if you're looking for a vintage style diver being inspired by a super compressor like case. So guys, that's the video. If you enjoy my productions, please do consider subscribing. I put out new content weekly, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for sticking with me, and as always, I'll catch you guys next time.